Welcome back to the Eduverse Enigma podcast. This week, we're chatting with special guest Rob Theriault, the Immersive Technology Manager at Georgian College. This episode, we'll be diving into new technologies impacting the education space, soft skills you can learn in VR, and the best VR programs for student learning. You won't want to miss it.
Awesome. Hello, and welcome to the Eduverse podcast. Today we have Rob Theriault joining us from Georgian College. Really excited to have you on the podcast, Rob, and would love if you could just start off with a quick background on yourself and saying hello.
Sure. Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me on your show. So I come to the XR world from a different background, I guess, an allied health background. I was a paramedic for 35 years and I taught paramedics for 20 years. So I was doing both jobs simultaneously, as you might imagine. And when I did a master's degree, I took an interest in virtual mixed and augmented reality. It caught my attention. I wrote a few papers on the subject. And I was interested in exploring it because it seemed like it was a form of experiential learning. And I thought that might be really powerful for students. So I went out on my own and purchased a headset and a gaming computer and started to experiment with it. And actually, I'll take a step back from there. Before I did that, I was attending a paramedic educator conference in Washington, D.C., and got to experience virtual reality for the first time. And I was standing at an exhibitor booth, and someone was already in the headset, and I could see what he was seeing on a large TV screen, and it was an animated patient sitting on the edge of his bed. And I thought, this just sort of looks like any old ordinary animated simulation that I'd seen before. And when I put the headset on, like for a lot of people who experience virtual reality for the first time, I was quite startled, shocked, honestly, to the experience of actually being in the room with someone who is sick. And even though he was an animated character, my sense of disbelief started to disappear in a very short period of time. I could see him sitting on his bed, struggling to breathe. I could see his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. I could see the discoloration on his lips from a lack of oxygen. When I spoke to him, he was only able to speak 4 to 5 words between taking breaths. I could reach down and feel his pulse. I could take a stethoscope and listen to his chest. I could put a blood pressure cuff on, a pulse oximeter on, a cardiac monitor on, and monitor his vital signs. And I could begin to initiate treatments. I could walk over to his night table and pick up his meds. I could walk into the kitchen if I wanted to, maybe have a conversation with his wife, although that wasn't part of the scenario. And when I came out of that experience, it was like coming out of a really thought-provoking movie or a really thought-provoking book where I just needed to have some alone time to process what I'd just seen and heard and felt and experienced. It was really surprising for me. And some things that struck me in the subsequent 20, 30, 45 minutes as I just sort of walked alone and processed my thoughts was that, one, I got the same twinge of adrenaline I get when I encounter someone in real life who's really, really sick or badly injured. And I think, okay, I need to assess and treat this person quickly before they deteriorate. 2, the sense of presence, the feeling of being in the environment, in a spatial environment in a room where I look up, I look down, I look sideways, I look all the way around, and I'm in this place with this person was powerful. The context was so valuable to me as an educator because when we teach first-year students, for example, we might do some case-based learning where we talk about how people might present clinically, but they're looking at bullet points on a PowerPoint slide and they're looking at maybe some images. They really have no context. And virtual reality gives you context. That was powerful to me. And the third was agency, being able to do things with my hands. And when I, went back to my notes from university and I read through those and did some other research, I started to get a better understanding of embodied cognition, being in a place, doing things with your hands, and the power of the learning that happens as a consequence of presence, context, and agency. And I thought I really have to introduce this to our paramedic labs. And so I managed to get some funding for some VR equipment for our lab, a gaming computer and a headset. And the software I was looking for was something that would address some learning objectives that would otherwise in the real world be difficult to address. And so I looked for mass casualty incident triage software, and I found one out of Australia. And this was a scenario where the paramedic student arrives at a hotel where a truck is driven through the lobby, and there's some people who've been killed, some who've been seriously injured, some less seriously injured. And the first paramedic who's on the scene, their role is to do a rapid assessment of everyone and determine who are the walking wounded, and can go to one location, who are the critically injured and need to be transported immediately, who are those who are deceased and won't be transported, etc. And to do these kinds of mass casualty incidents in real life requires months of preparation, and finding students who will volunteer to be victims and putting makeup on them to make them look injured, and finding a space. And on a college or university campus, when you find a space to do this, you also have to reach out to the fire, police, and paramedic dispatch to make sure they're aware that you're running a mock disaster, so that when people drive their cars by and they see bodies on the lawn, when they call 911, they're told it's a mock disaster that we're doing there. It's not real, because people don't stop and help as often as you would like them to do. They see something and they just call 911.
Right.
That was before Jeremy Valentin's book came out on experience on demand, where, I started to think about what can virtual reality do for learning that would otherwise in the analog world be dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, or expensive. And you can add to that things like difficult and impractical and inappropriate, and so on and so forth. So that was sort of where I started, and that led to a conversation with senior management who wanted to know from me where I thought virtual, mixed, and augmented reality was going. And I thought I made a really good case with them that it needed some upfront investment, some investment in human resources, some investment in equipment and software. But when I went away from that meeting, I knew in the back of my mind that most new technologies don't get funding until they reach a threshold level of interest. And so I really didn't think much would come out of that meeting. But a week later, to my surprise, they said, we really liked what you said. We agreed with everything you said. We're going to create a position. We'd like you to help us write up the description of the position, and we'd like you to apply for it. So I did. And it was a temporary position. It was a secondment, 2-year secondment. But a year into it, I told them, look, we're already expanding. I need to hire someone full time. So they converted it from a secondment to a full-time position. I applied for that and got it. So for the last 2.5 years, I've been working as the Immersive Technology Manager for the college. And that's a long story background, but that's how it all got started.
No, super interesting. And myself, I relate on the side of trying VR and then getting home and ordering a headset right away, because I was the same, tried VR for the first time and then bought a headset and gaming computer and jumped right into it. So that's amazing. Well, and then
And at my age too, it's an interesting experience, right? So you go to the local big box technology store, and I'd already purchased a headset. It was on its way in the mail. I was looking to get a gaming computer, so I go in and the young sales guy said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm looking for a gaming computer." And he said, "Oh, is this for your son?" And I thought, wow, that was both ageist and sexist in one question. So I found that a little offensive, but I said, "No, it's for me." And then he looked at me with a look I'm not sure I can describe, but bewildered is probably the best description. And he said, "What are you going to use it for?" And I thought, okay, I'm going to pull this guy's chain a little bit. So I paused and I thought, pretended to think about it. And I looked at him. I said, well, mostly for word processing. And he, he looked at me a little puzzled. And then he said, you're kidding, right? I said, yeah, I'm kidding. And I gave him the specs at that point. And he said, okay. And then another 10 minutes into the conversation, he asked me, so what do you plan to do? And I told him I plan to explore it for student learning, that I'm a professor at the college and this is what I'm doing. And then his reaction was, oh, that's amazing, incredible. I've never even heard of anyone doing that. And, oh, I hope you do well, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe you could apologize to me for those earlier comments, those
yes.
earlier judgments.
Yes.
So that was funny.
Yeah, I guess it's gotten a little simpler now that you don't necessarily need the PC and to go have those conversations,
right.
But it'd be nice.
Well, yeah,
it'd be more supportive.
It's amazing to think that, it was only 4 years ago, before the Quest came out, that if you wanted to do VR, so the first thing I did was I sent messages out via social media to see if any of my friends had a VR headset, which is kind of laughable in a sense, because I was 60 years old when I started in this position. I'm now 63, and of course no one had a headset, so I went out and bought one on my own. But at that time, basically, VR was only accessible through someone's basement lair. If you you wanted VR, you had to find someone who had a gaming computer and a VR headset, and it was all set up in the basement with lighthouses, towers, and everything else, and it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't mobile.
Yes.
So, but I didn't have anyone who met those characteristics or qualifications, so I was on my own from that point.
Yeah, I know you're feeling, and then I'm sure, as I did as well, you kind of became that person with the setup that people wanted to come check.
The layer.
You had the layer.
Yeah, I had the layer, and the cool thing was, so I got my layer. I had a Vive headset, the original Vive, and the lighthouses mounted to my walls.
Yep.
And one of the first things I experienced in VR was I met with one of the co-founders of a company called SimX, which is a patient simulation software, and Dr. Tyler Andre, and he was out of Los Angeles, and I live in Barrie, Ontario, north of Toronto, and we met in virtual reality, him in his house in LA, me in my basement in Barrie, and we went through some patient scenarios together. And in the process of doing the scenarios, all the while I'm thinking, I'm in Barrie and he's in LA, and how cool is this that we're meeting across a bed of a patient who's sick, and I'm asking the patient questions, and I'm doing vital signs, and I'm interpreting an X-ray, and I'm interpreting blood work, and I'm initiating treatments. That was incredible. And one of the scenarios he gave me was interesting. It was a young soldier on a mission with a group of soldiers, a platoon, and they were up in the mountains. And I was the medic in the scenario. And one of the soldiers was struggling to breathe, and I did an assessment on him, and I recognized that he had high altitude pulmonary edema, which is water on the lungs. And I knew this partly because I was a critical care flight paramedic. I worked on the air ambulance helicopter for 10 years, so I understood flight physiology pretty well. And the physician was surprised that I recognized this. I talked to him. I knew what altitude he was at. I listened to his chest with my stethoscope and, made a differential diagnosis or a provisional diagnosis. But the interesting part about the scenario was not the diagnosis so much. It was me as the low-ranking officer having to assert to the higher-ranking officer that this soldier could not continue the mission, which meant aborting the entire mission. And so that was an interesting soft skills exercise that I wasn't anticipating in that scenario. And I thought, wow, if you could do this with paramedic students and nursing students and physician students, medical students, and record it and debrief in pre-brief what a powerful experiential tool this would be.
For sure, and have a million questions coming off of that. But the first one, talking about the soft skills side of things, I've been reading a few books on soft skills and habits and things lately, and a lot of the examples they use are in hospitals of what are the procedures and processes that are set up and what has gone wrong in past emergencies because those procedures weren't in place. And one of the main ones, I can't remember, I think there was a specific name for it, but it's like when you're going into a surgery, you have certain stop points where everyone from the team is allowed to question the head doctor and everyone else. And yeah, it's a very interesting point of how VR is not just teaching you the skills that you need, like the hard skills you need, but it allows you to have those soft skills side of things. I guess from your experience, like how much has that soft skills piece been put into some of those more hard skill simulations that you're doing at Georgian, and how important is it?
Yeah. Well, nursing has always done a really great job of it. Paramedicine, we've tried to do a good job of it, not as good as we could do. And part of the difficulty too with community college programs, when you're looking at 2-year programs, for example, like a paramedic program, which is our entry level, and we have a 3rd year for advanced level, you're typically hiring paramedics to teach courses and subject areas that they may not have expertise in. So, for example, years ago, one of the courses I taught was crisis intervention, and I have no formal training in crisis intervention. And so I was teaching based on my own reading and based on my street experience. And, I think I did a pretty good job of it. I have a lot of street experience and a lot of calls that caused me to do some serious reflection and think about communications. And a lot of communications with patients is being calm, being compassionate, being empathetic, being understanding, listening carefully, rephrasing what they say, making sure you understand what they're telling you, trying to recognize your own implicit biases and work to shed those biases. And all of those things can be done potentially in virtual reality now, and we're seeing some really great virtual reality programs. We're using body swaps right now, which is really fantastic group of scenarios in there. There's Tailspin, there's some other applications, and with VR, you'll be able to role play, and as time goes on and the technology advances, we're going to see more and more programs with voice recognition and artificial intelligence where you'll be able to have a fairly natural conversation with avatars in a way that you experience a suspended disbelief. So the potential there is really exciting, and no single virtual reality experience is going to change any biases that you may have, but repeated exercises I'm very confident will have a much more powerful impact than what we're currently doing, which is often just having conversations with students about a whole host of things from, racism, prejudice, sexism, just, biases towards the neurodiverse population and other marginalized groups. And it's so important in healthcare. I mean, it's important in everyday life, but it's so important in healthcare because you really have to transcend any kind of a judgment and treat every single person the same, with the same level of competence and compassion and focus. And I spent my entire healthcare career trying to do that, trying to pass judgment. So I worry that if I ever get called to jury duty, I may just unleash my judgment, that I've tried to keep repressed my entire healthcare career.
Right.
He's guilty, I know it. I'm worried I may lose my objectivity. But the potential for an embodied experience to be able to gain some perspective and, walk a mile in someone's shoes, as they say in virtual reality, is really exciting. And, Stanford University has done a lot of research around that subject area, and all their papers are published and available through the Stanford site, the Virtual Human Interaction Lab site, and it's really good reading. Mel Slater and Jeremy Bailenson are, two of the lead researchers in this field, and there are many of their colleagues who I'm embarrassed I can't remember their names and should be naming as well, but there's some great research in that area, and I think we're going to see a great deal more of it across the whole spectrum of careers, not just healthcare, but in business and every imaginable job field.
For sure, and I can see why, like, those soft skills, and looking at the studies that PwC have done as well, comparing traditional to VR learning, and I can see how, when you're standing across from your peer or your professor, and you're trying to act out these scenarios, you might not take it as seriously, or you might just be super nervous in those scenarios. Versus being in VR, you get to actually really immerse yourself and practice those soft skills with the
which raises an interesting deployment challenge too for VR. Like when I talk with other colleges and universities and representatives from the K-12 industry about virtual reality, when they're trying to learn about, how should we get started on this? What should we do? One of the conversations that often comes up is, should we use virtual reality for distance learning, or should it be lab-based, or should it be, headsets in the library that students can borrow? And the simple answer is should be all those things. It depends on the VR applications and the type of headsets you're going to use. But the interesting thing about soft skills applications is that the person in them is going to be talking. So you're going to talk to the other avatars, and just any old lab space isn't going to cut it. You really need a private space, maybe a 10 by 10 office room where you can go in and just have some quiet space to talk. Just like if you're learning public speaking skills, you don't want to do it in a 10 cubicle VR place in the middle of the library with hundreds of people milling around where you're trying to give a speech. You want some quiet and some privacy, especially for those students who are introverted and shy and really struggle with the nervousness of public speaking, that there's an opportunity for them in a private place, no one listening, but them to practice giving a presentation over and over again. And again, another area in the liberal arts and other areas that is going to be really interesting to see the outcomes, because oftentimes when a presentation is an assignment, as a student, you prepare, and then you give the presentation and you're really nervous and you forget things and you spend too much time staring at your slides, and that's it. It's your one shot and you get a mark for that. That's really not the way learning should happen, right? In virtual reality, you can give that presentation over and over and over again. You can give it to a little boardroom, or you can give it to a big audience, and you'll get prompts. If certain softwares will give you prompts, tell you that you're spending too much time looking at the slides, or you're saying too much, or you're looking at your feet when you should be scanning the audience, and your pace is too fast, or it's too slow, or there are too many gaps. I don't think it'll tell you whether you're perspiring too much yet, but we'll get there.
One day, yeah.
Yeah, very soon.
Yes, yeah. No, that's a great point on how you have to set up your, like, one VR headset may be able to do everything, but you need to decide, is that something that is, you're sending that headset home? Do you need that private space? Can you have that open space in the library? And you were saying, like, other schools are coming to you, and myself and at XpertVR, we see Georgian as definitely one of the leaders in North America in adopting virtual reality and on what you're doing. So I'm curious, and Michelle and Angie, they gave some insight into this, but the main thing they said was Rob, because we have Rob, we're so innovative. So curious, what have you been doing yourself, but as well, what has Georgian been able to do that has allowed you to be so innovative in this space and pushing it forward that other colleges might not be able to do right now?
Yeah, first and foremost, I was determined to take a different approach. Virtual reality specifically is still new from an educational standpoint, from a practical deployment standpoint. I mean, you can go back 50 years or more to look at the history of virtual reality, but as a viable and affordable tool for student learning, we're really talking about since 2016. So it's brand new. It's the only educational technology that I know of where students can learn in the cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains. I don't know of any other tool that does that. And so my goal was to get virtual reality into the hands of as many faculty and students as possible, where a lot of colleges and universities harness the talents of their XR development students, create something in XR, maybe beta test it with some students and faculty, maybe do some research around it, and then what happens with it, it might get stuck in the lab somewhere and it never goes anywhere. I really felt that it was important to get virtual reality into the hands of as many students and teachers as possible so we can begin to form an understanding of its pedagogical potential, its strengths and its shortcomings, and look at all the other issues like accessibility. And so my approach was to look for what I thought were compelling virtual reality experiences and then take them to the faculty. So I'll give you an example. One of the first that I found was virtual reality anatomy. I thought it was incredible. I'm standing in a virtual reality human sciences lab with a anatomical structure that's my height or taller, and I can walk around it and I can pick bones off and I can look at the insertion points of the bone, see articulating surfaces. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I could look at different body systems. So literally from my office, I would see an anatomy physiology teacher walk by and I'd say, hey, do you want to try this out? Well, I'm just going to class, but what about 2:00? And yeah, 2:00, swing by the office. So they'd swing by, they'd get a 10-minute experience. They reacted the same way I reacted, many other people reacted. They're standing in the hallway with a VR headset with their hands moving about and the headset on and people looking at them like, what's going on in this hallway? And the person with the headset on would be saying, wow, 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 wow. Wow, whoa. And then we'd have a conversation about, how could we do this in pilot form and then evaluate it throughout the whole process, look at return on investment, et cetera. And so we'd have conversations around that. And then we went from faculty level to associate dean and dean level to say, we'd like to launch this pilot for a semester, maybe 2 semesters. I have the funds to purchase it because my senior management team believed that this was important, which was incredible, and often doesn't happen at the college university level.
How did you convince them? Was that just demos as well and them getting in the headset, or was there anything that you showed them to try and convince them?
Yeah. So yes, we. I mentioned we introduced virtual reality into our paramedic lab, but the second thing I did was I hosted an event in our paramedic lab, and I had some teachers who were had a little bit of VR experience. This was before we even launched any pilots, but they had tried the anatomy, they tried some other programs, and they agreed to come to the lab and demo these different software applications. And I invited a company to demo some augmented reality applications for patient simulation. And we invited the entire college to attend from all our campuses, and we invited nurses and physicians from local hospitals to attend because it was kind of a healthcare focus. And our vice president academic, who is now our president, attended. And I didn't really get a chance to talk to him, but from the look on his face, he looked impressed. And so he and the president were the ones who invited me to sit down and meet with them to tell them the story. And as I say, I was truly surprised that they wanted to go forward with this because, it was really a matter of timing and the right people on the senior leadership team who believed in it. 5 years earlier, it might have been shot down. And I've always had an interest in educational technology. I started teaching synchronously online in 1999. Almost no one was doing it then. I started doing it regularly in 2005. I started podcasting in 2005. I started flipping the classroom in 2000, 8 years before it was called Flip the Classroom, and that's not to boast, but my point is there are a lot of teachers, K to 12, college, university, who are very innovative, who want to explore, whose primary goal is to help the students learn in an enhanced way, to help improve learning. And a lot of what they do is flies under the radar. Either no one else believes in it, or they're too shy to tell anyone about it, or too introverted to tell anyone about it, and they just do it with their students, and the students are really happy, and the students, tell other students, and other students say to the teachers, why can't we do this? Why can't you podcast your classes and things like that? But they fly under the radar. And so part of my mindset changed towards the end of my teaching the role, in that I wanted to sort of make it more public what we were doing, the innovative stuff we were doing. One, to help promote our program and to get the word out to prospective students that, hey, Georgian is doing some really innovative stuff in their paramedic program. So it was kind of fluke that I got the funding and the go ahead to take the approach that I did. But I told the senior management team, look, I really want to talk with frontline teachers, because that's where innovation and early adoption happens. If you try to go from the deans down, from upper management down, it's not going to happen, because teachers in college and university are fiercely independent. No one tells them how to teach. They have to seek it out themselves. And so if they have buy-in, then you go up, a few levels and bring it back down again. So I was given the go-ahead to do that. And I wanted to introduce virtual reality, particularly virtual reality, in a thoughtful and fiscally responsive way. And to me, that meant find something really compelling, do a pilot with a small cohort, 10 to 25 students, which is what we did with Indigenous Studies. They had a small group of 15 students initially, and evaluate it and iterate if you need to, and then look at, is this worth integrating in the curriculum? And there's some things that are not, because they're very expensive. They're a cost per student per year, and they only address one or two learning objectives, and they're not particularly unique learning objectives, and they're just not going to fly. On the other hand, virtual reality anatomy hits on almost every single learning objective in the course. And the software is about the cost of a textbook, so that makes perfect sense. So that's the approach we took. People have often asked me, how do we end up doing virtual reality in about 16 different program areas? And part of it is that approach. Part of it is also, I think, when I think about it, as a paramedic, I'm very impatient, and I like to make things happen quickly, and I like to see positive outcomes quickly. But I'm also prepared for the negative outcomes, for the the VR failures as well. But I think that's motivated me to help get this into the hands of as many people as possible.
Amazing. So to summarize, it sounds like you got to get into VR yourself first if you're passionate about it and you're looking to spread the word. And then from there, just try and get as many as your colleagues into virtual reality as possible, so you can see what are the programs where it might impact and who's interested. And then once you can do that, you can look at setting up an event, or at least that pilot that you can do, and then it can expand from there.
Yeah, it's interesting, to my earlier point about teachers being innovators and early adopters, and they fly under the radar. We did virtual reality in our paramedic lab. I got to go ahead to take this position and start up. And a few months later, I discovered that a gentleman by the name of Costin Bianchiu, who's the coordinator of the Architectural Technology program, he had been using virtual reality in architectural technology for about 3 years already.
Oh, no way.
And I didn't know about it. and probably there were probably a few people who knew about it, but I thought, wow, like this guy is doing really amazing cutting edge stuff, and not many people know about this. And so I had a conversation with him about how he got started and how he does it. And he basically, he does a lot of work. He was bringing in a Rift S and the lighthouses and everything, setting them up in a computer room in a corner and having students take their 2D designs and put them into 3D so they get the spatial perspective. And then he would pack it all up at the end of his class and put it away, bring it all out again. Incredible amount of work, very labor intensive, but so impressive that he did that. And architecture is just a great use case. I once attended an event in virtual reality, coincidentally, given by an architectural firm, and they were tasked with the job of designing a children's hospital. And they shrunk their avatars down to the size of a 5-year-old to get a child's perspective on the design. And I thought, it just sent a shiver down my spine. I thought
that's amazing,
brilliant and inspirational. I thought that was a use case, great use case. But you asked about where we're doing virtual reality. I'll just give you a list, and we're doing it in so many places now. I literally had to take out my cheat sheet, so I'm reading from a sheet here to tell you where we're doing virtual reality. So we're still doing it in architectural technology, and Costin is brilliant. We're doing it in Indigenous studies, and this was interesting because, again, I attended this other virtual reality event, and it was French conversation in a cafe, and the event was in a cafe. And I thought, wow, conversational French in a cafe, doing it in a cafe. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it's context. It just makes so much sense. But how is it done now? It's done in a classroom, right? Okay, we're going to pretend we're in a cafe, and maybe, a good teacher will bring out a tablecloth and, empty glasses of wine and bottles and, set up. I mean, teachers really do some brilliant stuff, but that's a lot of work, right? And I approached our Indigenous Studies faculty because I knew they were teaching language. And I said, what do you think about this idea of doing some of your language courses in virtual reality? And they had a course called Language in the Home. And I said, I can take a template of a home in Altspace VR and furnish it for you and label everything in the Anishinaabe, Mowin, and English words. And you can bring students in there once a week and have conversations in the house in this context. And it's interesting because Michelle O'Brien's first reaction was sort of skeptical on the idea. But she said to me, but you know what, Rob? It's not about me. It's about the students. And I love that. That's how a good educator thinks, right? It's not about what I think. It's about what the students think. And I've had faculty, say to me, Rob, I will never put on a VR headset on my face. And my reaction is, okay, no problem. We don't need to ever have a conversation about this again. I'm not a sales guy. I'm never going to try to sell this to faculty. But I've had some serious skeptics who were really, and told me up front, I'm really skeptical. And then when they tried it, the reaction was, okay, this was not what I expected. This is incredible. I'll give you an example. We have a maritime ship navigation program where students learn how to pilot these massive tanker ships. And we have one of the world's largest ship simulators at our Olin Sound campus. It's a big deck with wraparound video. It's really beautiful, and it's an incredible simulator. But it's also very expensive to maintain. So we wanted one of the faculty members wanted to supplement that with virtual reality. So we showcased it at the campus, and there were 3 instructors, teachers there who were very skeptical. One in particular who was really, really skeptical. But they said, yeah, I want to try it anyway. And all 3 of them went into it and said, okay, I get this now. I totally get this. And I'm on a ship deck. Everything is the same. The radar, it's all advanced, and I can do things with it. And so oftentimes it's just that. But apart from Indigenous studies, we use VR for animal dissection in our veterinary technician program. We do a little VR anatomy in that program as well. We found an open education resource from Virginia Tech University for bovine and canine anatomy. We're doing VR anatomy in our biotech degree, nursing degree, paramedic program, occupational and physiotherapy assistant program, acupuncture, massage therapy, fitness and health promotion. We're in the 2nd year of this study. We've done patient resuscitation in our advanced care paramedic program. We've done VR in our events management program, tourism program. In the trades, we built a boiler plant simulation in collaboration with 7 other colleges. We're looking at marine ship navigation this fall. And we started doing some digital twins. Backtrack a bit. We're looking at virtual reality painting, 3D painting and design and sculpting for our fine arts program. We're doing digital twins for learning. So, those Princess Margaret home tour type things, but with information labels all over the place. So for our English for academic purposes, we did our Georgian dining room, and students can go in there on PC or in a VR headset and listen to videos, see everything labeled in the English words, and learn from that. We're also scanning objects, so students or faculty will have access to 3D objects for either PowerPoint or for virtual reality. And we're doing a train the trainer course. As you know, I developed a virtual reality educator micro-credential, and we've had 3 external classes come through now, and it's been really successful. Because I think I want teachers to understand what virtual reality is all about, the basic pedagogy of VR, and to help them form a peer learning network of colleagues with similar interests and knowledge bases, so we can share and learn from each other. So that's I probably missed a few things, but that's it in a synopsis. About 16 different program areas.
Incredible. And yeah, it's so cool that you've been able to get that many programs involved. And I love that you've now made the Train the Trainer program or course as well for teachers to take. I guess looking at all of those other programs, I know Georgian's looking to launch their like VR development program or courses soon as well. Curious, like I know a lot of the things you've done are like off the shelf applications, but looking forward, how important do you think like having that VR development program as part of Georgian as well as the Train the Trainer is going to be? And I ask because I don't know how much you've heard, but we're working with a class from Georgian right now on AI and how to have conversations in VR. So I'm very excited of what we've been working on there, and so curious to hear about like the student side being involved.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I've avoided the development side, as I said, because I wanted to get VR into the hands of as many people as possible. But the development piece is so important, and we have done some development based on grants that we received, and we're still working on a couple of grants and doing some development on that side. What's important to me for the future is virtual reality applications are expensive, and I'm hoping that we can develop things on our own and in collaboration with other schools and begin to make certain virtual reality applications as open education resources, or just available resources at no cost, not necessarily open education resources, because that means that you supply other schools with the entire source code and make it reject, which I'm fine with too. But, for example, we're collaborating with St. Cloud State University and St. Cloud Technical and Community College to develop some physiology applications in virtual reality, and based on a grant, and these will be open education resources. And what's funny is, how on earth did we end up collaborating with schools in Minnesota? Well, I was at a virtual reality event, and I really don't like events where there's a lot of lecturing. The best part is always after the lecture, where you can mill around and talk with people. And I was in Avatar form, I was sort of eavesdropping on a conversation that was happening between 2 people, and then they sort of invited me to the conversation. We introduced ourselves, and one of the people, one of the avatars in that group was a guy by the name of Mark Gill, who was at St. Cloud State University, and he ran a 4-year degree program for XR development. And he told me he was from St. Cloud, and I said, "That's incredible. I'm speaking at a conference in St. Cloud in April." And he said, "Rob, are you sure it's St. Cloud? Because it's not really a conference town." And I said, "Yeah, it's a paramedic educator conference, and I've been invited to speak there." And he said, "Well, when you come, let's grab a beer." And then COVID hit in March,
Of course.
right? And everything locked down. So that conference went to online. And I never got to meet Mark. And Meta ended up hiring Mark. So now he's living in California. And but we're still working with the university and the community college over there to develop these applications. And so the collaborations that have happened serendipitously have been amazing. And that's where we initially had these discussions around what can we develop collaboratively that can be open source, that schools wouldn't have to pay for. Because when you start looking at 100, 200, 300 per student per year, it becomes cost prohibitive. As fantastic as it is, and especially if it only addresses a couple of learning objectives, as important as those learning objectives are, and as fantastic as that virtual reality application might be, it's just not affordable in some cases.
For sure. I guess that brings up a really interesting question. At XpertVR, we've been looking at different ways to build that type of collaboration between multiple schools as well as ourselves, and how can we do different licensing deals or things where we can really discount the cost of our development. But I know something that's we've seen a little bit in Ontario specifically, but I'm sure in other regions, there's obviously that competition between different colleges. So do you see it to build that collaboration, you kind of have to go out of your region, or what are some of the things you think that Ontario colleges and universities or just others should be doing to collaborate more?
You can go anywhere in the world, of course, to collaborate. And in my mind, I have a vision of creating a global consortium of higher education or a co-op of some sort, where we co-develop and independently develop applications, VR and AR, that are available to all member institutions. And perhaps you pay a subscription fee. If you're a non-contributing school, you pay a lesser fee. If you're a contributing school, we would probably work out some sort of arrangement where we can develop a library of applications that are shareable, particularly when it comes to skills. So whether it's a nursing skill, learning how to operate an infusion pump, or put in a Foley catheter, or it's a trade skill where you're learning how to troubleshoot a heat pump or something, those short VR experiences, in my personal opinion, should be on a standalone headset. They should be a perpetual license instead of an annual fee or a student or fee per student per year. And some people are developing some great little short VR applications, and they want a certain amount of money per student per year. And I'm thinking, I'm not a business guy, but I sometimes think, if you sold this at, I don't know, $60, $80 perpetual license per headset through App Lab or some other store, you might get much greater volume. And as someone sort of overseeing immersive technology at my college, we might purchase 60 copies of it for our trade students, or 150 copies of it for our trade students, and put it on that many headsets to make it available for them to borrow. So some of those shorter programs might be more suitable to perpetual license. But what I would really love to see from enterprise is a recognition that public colleges can't, and public universities can't afford what enterprise can afford in some education pricing. One of the things we struggle with now is a mobile device management system, and it's expensive, and we have no choice but to pay for it. And I'd like to see that come down. I'd like even better to see headset makers provide a free basic MDM. And for additional features, maybe you go to a different MDM company, or you pay a separate price for additional features.
Right.
So yeah, the pricing models have been changing a lot over the last couple of years, I've noticed, and in a lot of instances, I've had conversations, and I think I've persuaded companies to change the pricing model. And I think it's important for more of us as educators to get in on this at the ground level, understand the pedagogy of virtual reality, communicate with the the developers of virtual reality and communicate our challenges and our needs, so enterprise understands education better.
For sure. And I think at XpertVR, we're a little unique because we've been working with academic institutions. So we've heard a lot of this feedback. But I know even
Right.
in convincing enterprises, I was listening to one of the other podcasts that you were on, and you were talking about pricing and things along these lines. And you convinced me to pitch to Drew and others on our team about how we should be doing pricing as we're looking to release products. So definitely helped convince one team. So, yeah.
Good. Yeah. I mean, you have to look at it from a pedagogical perspective. Like, as I say, there are some complex virtual reality programs that address a lot of learning objectives, and the price you pay is probably a good return on investment. Like patient simulation is very complex to develop and is a little pricey, but ultimately the hope is that things like skills-based and critical thinking level type applications will translate into better performance, into safer performance, into safer tradespeople, safer healthcare providers. And so you have to think about, the research there is a little bit of research there now that shows improvements in performance and safety. There's still lots of low-hanging fruit in the research area, so we need to continue to research those areas for proof of concept. The other area I've struggled with is, where does virtual reality belong? Because in a community college, there's usually a theory component, a practical component, and then a field component across many, many programs. And the more I spend time thinking about virtual reality and working with faculty, the more I think that virtual reality belongs in the didactic portion. It enhances the theory portion. So if I'm teaching patient care theory, instead of giving lectures, I do case-based learning. I bring my students into virtual reality. We see real patients. It's contextual. There's a sense of presence. There's agency. And to me, that's going to be more powerful. And the hope is that will translate into better and safer performance in the lab, and ultimately better and safer performance in the field. So, it's got to be difficult from an enterprise perspective for all the money you spend on research and development, and you want to recoup your costs, and you have to recoup them in a time frame that allows you to pay your loans and your bills. So I'm totally empathetic to that, and extremely grateful when companies bend a little bit, and it's going to be tough too, because it's getting adoption in schools is not easy. Although since the dark clouds of the pandemic have begun to part just a little bit, I'm seeing more and more exploration and adoption at schools.
For sure. And talking about that adoption, and you've already touched on a bunch of points here about, moving VR into that theory-based area, how pricing should change, MDMs becoming more accessible. But where do you see like the future of VR in education? I know this is kind of always the big question, but like 5 to 10 years down the road.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to play an even greater role in skills acquisition and critical thinking and perspective taking, and in the soft skills area. It's going to move into a lot of different areas, and it's just going to become, in my view, more and more pervasive as the headsets become more advanced. They become lighter, more comfortable. Pass-through technology really excites me because you're far less likely to experience things like vertigo with pass-through technology. We're looking at adopting a software program called Nano, where students will be able to be in the classroom and using pass-through technology, be able to pass a protein to a classmate in the front of the class just by pushing it with a thumbstick. And they don't even have to get up from their desk. They don't have to worry about tripping over their desk with pass-through technology. So I see more and more adoption and exploration. Obviously, it's not going to be the answer for all things, but I really hope it shifts education from lecturing and anesthetizing your students with a lecture and putting them all on mute, or putting them all on mute in real life, to experiential learning and exploration and inquiry in a contextual environment. Like, why would you ever show pictures of the Acropolis in a Greek history class when you can take your students and your students can sit on the steps of the Parthenon? It's just going to get more and more persuasive. It's going to be the Wesley Crusher of education in the future, and I think more and more people are going to be doing it at home. My grandfather used to listen to shortwave radio when he retired. I'll be in a nursing home wearing VR glasses and probably flying, around the globe. And, I haven't been to this museum in a long time. I think I'm just going to, bear east and fly in this direction now. So yeah, I think the potential is huge, and it's just going to get better.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. It's we're pushing the future forward right now, and it's very exciting to think about everything from in the education space to being in a retirement home flying around, being able to have that experience.
Yeah, exactly.
We're coming up on time here, so I have some kind of rapid fire questions where I'll just say like one or two words and respond with one word or a sentence if you want. Not all of them are VR related, but maybe give some more personality of yourself to this as well.
I hope no psychiatrists are listening to this rapid fire thing, because I might be diagnosed with some kind of problem.
So
okay, go ahead.
Skip past this piece. Rapid fire. First one, pop culture.
Pop culture. That's probably a little out of my area of expertise.
What comes to mind?
Well, define pop culture.
Well, however you define. When I say pop culture, what's
boomer might understand.
Well, if I say, I guess pop culture, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Whether that be from a TV show or movie or a song or anything.
Well, I guess from a movie perspective, I think we're going to see volumetric videos and movies that you can interact with, which will be interesting.
Oh, very interesting. Awesome. Conference or conferences.
People love to meet face-to-face in the real world. There's no question about it. I'm an introvert, but I crave it too. So I think we'll never see a complete replacement of face-to-face conferences, but I think more and more we'll see conferences in immersive virtual worlds rather than Zoom calls or team calls, because those are anesthetizing. When you're giving a presentation and you've got everyone on mute, people slip into a coma. But when you can mill around in avatar form and have conversations and randomly bump into people, far more engaging and immersive.
For sure. NFTs, or specifically anything NFT blockchain related to education.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about NFTs or blockchain, but I think they're, from what I understand, are going to play an increasingly prominent role. And I'm particularly interested in NFTs from our fine arts students' perspective, who are going to be learning to paint and sculpt and design in 3D. And, there's going to be an opportunity to sell their artwork in a way that when it's resold, they're still making money on it. Whereas in the past, you might have sold a painting for $100 and 20 years later it sells for $10,000 because you've become famous. And the original owner of that painting, or the second owner of that painting, gets the money, not you as the artist. And so NFT is an opportunity to change that from a digital perspective and from a analog perspective as well.
For sure. And last one, education.
Education has to change in a lot of ways. And outside of virtual reality, one of the ways in which education has failed at all levels, including in my own teaching, is we have failed to recognize how dangerous confirmation bias is, as an example. And social media exacerbates confirmation bias, because if you lean left or you lean right or you lean in any direction in social media, the posts that you read, the posts that you like, the posts that you make are going to generate more like posts in your feed. And that exacerbates the confirmation bias process. And that's dangerous. It isolates people, it silos people, it silos groups, it creates conflict between friends. It creates conflicts between me and my friends. And I think right across the board, K-12 and higher education, we need to do a better job of helping people understand bias, explore bias, recognize our own biases, and address those, because it's dangerous. And oftentimes our views are based on disinformation, false information, and we've not, in the education system, done a good job of helping people understand what is evidence, what is credible evidence, what is not, how to be a skeptic. And so virtual reality, I think, will help in some ways in debiasing and perspective taking in those areas, but it's a much broader problem. So that's a dangerous rabbit hole to go down, and a topic for a long discussion.
For sure, but definitely an interesting perspective on where education can make that impact, because we've been talking a lot about hard skills, and obviously we talked a little bit about soft skills in specific industries, but squashing that confirmation bias as a whole is a very interesting way to look at what education can do.
Yeah. So, you know what? We haven't talked about augmented reality. I want to just say something fast about augmented reality. I haven't seen a lot of good instructional design in augmented reality yet, but it's on my radar. I have seen one or two really good examples of augmented reality for learning, but most of it is instructional. The killer app in augmented reality is the remote assistant. But in education, instruction doesn't equal education. Instruction is like you use your GPS to get to your friend's house 30 minutes away once a week to visit, and then on the 9th trip, your GPS fails and you have no idea how to get to your friend's place. That's instruction.
Yes.
Education is more instruction and then mentoring and sort of slowly weaning yourself away as the mentor so that the person can do it independently. Those are just some of the elements of good instructional design. And I've not seen a lot of good instructional design in augmented reality. And I love the fact that VR is very immersive. But what I would say about augmented reality is it's going to completely upend education starting in the next 10 years, is my prediction, 20 years. If we have not prepared for it, it's going to be disastrous, because people are going to be wearing augmented reality glasses. They're going to be wearing prescription augmented reality glasses, so you won't be able to ask a student to take them off. And students are going to be wearing augmented reality contact lenses. And when it comes to exams, if we continue to administer multiple choice exams and short answer exams, the students are going to put their AR glasses into test mode, and it's going to examine your exam questions, and it's going to come up with a probable answer with a 98% certainty, and students are just going to fly through those exams. So we have to seriously think now, and I mean right now, yesterday, the day before. This is a little like the climate crisis in education. We have to start working right away to start thinking about how students are going to get evaluated, how we're going to do formative and summative assessments of students in the future. And maybe grades and tests are not the way to go. Maybe a competency-based approach is a better approach. Maybe, for example, the student does a skill or does a simulation in virtual reality over and over again to the point where, at the third try, they're scoring 80%, and artificial intelligence predicts that they will continue to score over 80% after 3 tries. So that's a threshold, right? That's some people call that like a eureka moment. For another student, it might be 5 tries. For another student, it might be 7 tries, because every student learns at a different pace and in a different way. But we have to seriously look at the K-12, but particularly in higher ed, at augmented reality and what it's going to do to testing. And there's going to become an equity issue where, student A says, well, student B did better on his test because he's got better AR glasses than I have, or
Right.
better software. So there's going to become an equity issue. And the education field has not thought this through at all. So this is something we need to, I'm sure some of them are thinking about it, but I think about it a lot. And, we need to address it. And in some ways, it's really exciting because it'll change our thinking about how students learn. And we need to think about ways that people learn and that's more interesting and engaging. I did my undergrad and my university degree online, and it's a very isolated experience. And it takes a certain type of student who has the self-motivation to do it. And we're going to see more and more students migrating to online learning, and we need to make it more engaging, more interesting, more immersive, more contextual, more hands-on. And XR has a potential to really revolutionize that, and we'll see where it goes.
For sure. And I think that's a really good point. I thought you were going to kind of maybe go the opposite way. Well, not opposite, but like the competition that AR brings, because you may look at schools today and look at like YouTube or Coursera, Udemy, Masterclass, all of these places where they've been able to take a hold of the new technology of video and use that to replace certain things that universities and colleges may have done in the past. And AR is going to do the same. But also, so making sure that schools are innovative to keep up with that technology, but then as well in the testing space. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah. Well, YouTube and podcasts has really put teachers on their toes. Right? When I was teaching the paramedic program, I gave students a list of podcasts they should listen to that I thought were at their level and above. And because some of the most brilliant people in the world are generating YouTube videos and podcasts. And now, all of us have access to these people that we didn't have access to before. And it's recorded and you can play it and replay it and, over and over and over again. And, I remember as a young paramedic, I would go to an event and there was a physician giving a talk and she would say something absolutely brilliant. And I tried to write it down, but maybe didn't have time to write it down. And I tried to talk to her afterwards to ask questions, but she was busy talking with other people and then it's gone, right?
Right.
But now she's podcasting and I've got it. It's on my phone. It's on my, device and I can listen to it over and over again. So yeah, YouTube and podcasting is a really powerful tool that many more students should be using, and teachers have to use it because if they fall behind their students, that's embarrassing for one, and two is really unacceptable in a fast-paced moving world. And so technologies are changing the way students learn, and we need to be adaptive and flexible and nimble.
For sure.
Even boomers like me.
No, I definitely wouldn't call you a boomer with how much you've jumped into the virtual reality space and
well,
for the term of boomer.
I'm not your typical boomer.
Yes, exactly. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and chatting. I think we could continue going for another hour or more, so we might have to do another one in the future. But is there anything else that you would like to say or any shout outs that you'd like to give?
No, other than to, hope this encourages other educators to explore VR. And I'm available on LinkedIn if anyone wants to reach out to me. I have conversations with educators all the time. I'm a big believer in peer learning networks and helping each other learn. Paulo Coelho once said, sometimes we have to travel a great distance to find what is near. And that's very true of educational technology. Sometimes you search and search and search, and then you have a serendipitous conversation with someone. They say, oh, yeah, I do this. And you think, why didn't I learn this 2 years ago? So I hope people will feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for offering that. And we didn't really talk on it, but I also had Jonathan Richter on the podcast. So for anybody that's Canadian, both Rob and I are on the iLearn Canadian board. So please join us. And if you're not in Canada, iLearn is worldwide. So make sure to join your chapter to get that peer network. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Rob. And we will chat soon again in the metaverse, I'm sure.
Thanks, Evan.
Have a good one. Bye.